What would you do if the person you trusted most in the world used your own life's work to delete you from existence? This isn't a story about losing money. It's a story about losing your name, your legacy, and every digital trace of your identity. And the terrifyingly perfect way one man fought to get it all back. Welcome to a story of digital ghosts and a revenge so cold it was coded and binary. Before we dive into the deep end of Betrayal, if you appreciate tales of justice served with a side of cutting-edge tech, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It truly helps the channel more than you know. Now, let's get into it. The air in the innovation lab of Nexus Dynamics hummed with a specific kind of electricity, the smell of ozone and ambition. It was 2:47 a.m. Liam Croft wiped the smear of thermal paste from his brow and slid the final cooling plate into the server housing. Across the workbench, his best friend since MIT, Julian Vance, handed him a torque driver without a word. They moved in a silent, perfect sync, a 12-year partnership distilled into instinct. "Initiate sequence," Liam said, his voice hoarse from too much coffee and not enough sleep. Julian's fingers flew across the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled, reflected in his glasses. "Booting the Aura core. Come on, baby. Talk to Daddy." The massive server bank, their life's work for the last 3 years, flickered to life. Fans whirred from a whisper to a low, powerful thrum. A holographic interface materialized in the center of the room, a shimmering, intricate web of light. "System online. Aura AI initialized. Good morning, Liam. Good morning, Julian." The voice was calm, gender-neutral, and utterly without artifice. It was the most beautiful sound Liam had ever heard. He let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a decade. He looked at Julian, and a grin split his exhausted face. Julian whooped, vaulting over the bench to pull Liam into a bone-crushing hug. "We did it, man! We actually did it!" That was the moment. The pinnacle. Aura wasn't just another AI assistant. It was a predictive architecture engine, a system that could design everything from more efficient city grids to life-saving medical equipment by learning, adapting, and iterating at a speed 1,000 human engineers couldn't match. They'd built it in a rented warehouse in Austin, Texas, fueled by venture capital, a shared dream, and a bond Liam thought was unbreakable. Julian was the charismatic frontman, the one who could charm millions from stone-faced investors with his easy smile and polished pitches. Liam was the architect, the reclusive genius who spoke the language of machines more fluently than he spoke to people. They were two halves of a perfect whole. Julian was the only person who could pull Liam out of a 72-hour coding fugue, showing up with a bacon cheeseburger and the exact right amount of sarcasm. Liam was Julian's anchor, the solid, brilliant ground to his partner's sky-high ambitions. 6 months after that late-night triumph, Nexus Dynamics was the talk of the tech world. The valuation soared into the billions. They bought a proper downtown office with a stunning view of the Colorado River. Liam's life had transformed. He'd met Ilara, a landscape architect with a laugh that could quiet the constant hum of code in his mind. They'd just bought a modern glass and steel house on the outskirts of the city, and for the first time, Liam's future felt as tangible and well-designed as his software. It was a life built not just on success, but on trust. The end began on a Tuesday that felt exactly like Monday, but with marginally better coffee. Liam was running late. A morning cuddle session with their new golden retriever puppy, Kepler, had derailed his schedule. He biked to the Nexus Tower, his mind already wrestling with a tricky bit of code for Aura's next update. He swiped his keycard at the main entrance. Beep. Access denied. He frowned. Weird. The reader was probably dusty. He swiped again, slower. Beep. Access denied. Contact security. A cold prickle, entirely separate from the Austin heat, traced its way down his spine. He pulled out his phone to call Julian and went straight to voicemail. I was stranger still. Julian was surgically attached to his phone. Liam, is there a problem? Ben Carter, the head of security, a man Liam had hired himself, stood inside the glass doors, his face an unreadable mask. My card's on the fritz, Ben. Let me in, will you? I need to get to the server farm, the new cooling. I'm afraid I can't do that, Mr. Croft, Ben interrupted, his voice flat. My orders are explicit. Orders from who? Julian? Just tell him it's me. Liam tried to laugh, but it came out strained. The orders come from the board, sir. Your access to Nexus Dynamics premises and systems has been revoked, effective immediately. The world did not slow down. It accelerated, tilting on its axis. The board? What are you talking about? I am the board. Julian and I are the board. His voice was rising, attracting glances from people entering the building. They swiped their cards, the doors hissed open, and they walked into his lobby without a second look. I'm going to need you to step away from the door, sir, Ben said, his hand resting on the butt of his taser. The gesture was small, professional, and it felt like a physical blow. Call Julian, right now. Mr. Vance is in a board meeting and is not to be disturbed. His instructions were very clear. If you have questions, you are to direct them to the company's legal counsel. He slid a business card through a narrow gap in the door. It landed on the concrete. Shaw and Partners, LLP. Stunned, Liam stumbled back. He fumbled with his phone, his fingers suddenly numb. He opened the Nexus Dynamics internal app. It prompted him to log in. He typed his credentials, invalid username or password. A lead weight dropped into his stomach. He opened his banking app. The account he used for daily expenses was still there, but the main account, the one holding his majority stake in Nexus, the one with 8 figures in it, it was gone. Not zeroed out. Gone. As if it had never existed. His personal email began to ping with frantic notifications, password reset requests, two-factor authentication alerts. His cloud storage accounts were being logged into from unfamiliar devices. He watched, helpless, as the digital pillars of his life were systematically demolished. He drove home in a blind haze, his heart hammering against his ribs. He screeched into his driveway, ran to the front door, and inserted his key. It didn't turn. The locks had been changed. Through the large living room window, he saw movers. Men in uniforms were carefully wrapping his and Alara's art in bubble wrap, boxing up his books, his records, the framed photo of him and Julian at graduation. He hammered on the door. What is this? Get out of my house! Alara! Ilara! The door opened. It wasn't Alara. It was a man in a sharp suit holding a tablet. Liam Croft? The man asked, though it wasn't a question. Who are you? Where's my wife? I am a representative of the bank. This property has been seized following a default on several significant loans taken out against it. You have been served notice electronically for the past 30 days. He held out the tablet, showing a legal document. Liam's name was on it. So was his signature. A signature he'd never seen before. That's not my signature. This is a mistake. Where is Alara? The occupant, Ms. Ilara Reed, vacated the premises yesterday. Now I must ask you to leave. Trespassing on repossessed property is a criminal offense. Liam stood on his own porch, homeless, jobless, and utterly erased. The scale of the deception was so vast, so complete, his mind couldn't process it. This wasn't a business dispute. This was an annihilation. He checked into a motel that rented rooms by the hour, paying with the last of the cash in his wallet. The room smelled of bleach and despair. His phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Tech news. Nexus Dynamics CEO Julian Vance files restraining order against co-founder Liam Croft, alleges unstable behavior and corporate espionage. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination.
It painted Liam as a reclusive, paranoid figure who had become a liability. It mentioned anonymous sources who described his recent, erratic, and aggressive outbursts. It mentioned his failed attempt to illegally transfer proprietary Aura source code to a foreign entity. It was all lies, woven together with such plausibility that anyone reading it would believe every word. Julian had not just kicked him out, he had rewritten history. He had airbrushed Liam out of the picture of their own company. Liam's fury was a cold, black star in his chest. He didn't scream or break things. He sat on the scratchy motel bedspread and became very, very still. The emotional part of his brain shut down. The analytical part, the core of who he was, booted up. He was no longer Liam Croft, betrayed friend. He was a system administrator investigating a catastrophic failure. He was a hacker probing a fortress for a single vulnerability. His first move was to find Alara. He called her parents, her friends. Their responses were curt, nervous. "She doesn't want to talk to you, Liam. You need to get help, man." They'd been turned against him, prepped with Julian's narrative.
He finally found her. She was sitting in a coffee shop, the one they used to go to every Sunday. She looked pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She flinched when she saw him. "Alara, please, talk to me. What is happening?" "Liam, you need to leave me alone." Her voice was a fragile whisper. "Just tell me why. The house, the restraining order, none of it is true." Tears welled in her eyes. "Julian showed me everything, Liam. The bank statements, the emails to that company in Beijing, the psychological evaluations. He's trying to protect you, Liam, to protect the company. He said you're sick, and you don't even know it." A psychological evaluation. Julian had thought of everything. He'd built a cage of paperwork and lies so airtight it was suffocating. "He's lying. It's all forged. Alara, you know me. Look at me. Do you believe I could do any of that?" She wouldn't meet his gaze. "He said you'd say that. He said you'd deny it all because you can't face it. He's getting you help, Liam. Just go with it, please." She stood up, grabbing her purse. "Don't contact me again. Julian's lawyer said it could implicate me too." She fled, leaving him alone in the cafe. That was the moment the last ember of hope died. Julian hadn't just stolen his company. He'd stolen his wife, his reputation, his very sanity in the eyes of the person he loved most. The cold, black star of his fury began to generate a terrifying gravity. Revenge would not be enough. He needed restoration. He needed to prove to the world and to himself that he existed. He used the last of his cash to buy a cheap, powerful laptop and a subscription to a shady, encrypted satellite internet service from a provider that didn't ask questions. He moved to a different, even dingier motel, paying week to week with cash from pawning his watch, the last object of value he owned. He began to code. He wasn't building Aura. He was building its ghost, a parasite, a digital sleeper agent he called Janice. His plan was not to destroy Nexus. That would be like burning down the Louvre to destroy a single forgery. He wanted to prove the forgery was a forgery. He needed to expose the original artist.
His vulnerability was Julian's one tiny blind spot, his vanity. Julian saw himself as the strategic mastermind, but he was not a deep systems architect. He didn't truly understand the plumbing of the masterpiece they'd built. He'd likely hired expensive consultants to create his forgeries and lock Liam out, but there were back doors, Easter eggs, and fail-safes that Liam had coded into Aura's deepest architecture during those late nights, things he'd never even told Julian about. a secret handshake between the creator and his creation. Janus was designed to do one thing: lie dormant inside the Nexus network until it heard a very specific encrypted digital key, a key only Liam possessed. Once activated, it would begin a two-phase process. Phase 1, it would silently copy every piece of data on the Nexus servers, every email, every financial transfer, every version of the source code, every security log. Phase 2, it would perform a digital archaeological dig, searching for the proof of Julian's fraud. It would find the original, unaltered source code repositories and compare them to the current ones, highlighting every forgery. It would trace the fraudulent financial transactions back to their point of origin. It would find the truth, bundle it up, and then create a backdoor to transmit it all to him. It was a moonshot. It took him 3 months of living on coffee, canned beans, and pure, undiluted rage. He lost weight. He grew a ragged beard. He became a ghost in a rented room, his face illuminated only by the glow of his screen, his fingers dancing to the rhythm of his revenge. Finally, it was ready. The code was perfect, elegant, and utterly undetectable. But he needed to get it inside the fortress. He couldn't walk in the front door. He needed a Trojan horse. He thought of Kepler, his goofy, loving puppy. Julian was always allergic to dogs. He'd never let Kepler into the new office. But the old warehouse? The place where they'd started? Where they'd shared that triumphant hug? Julian was a sentimentalist. He'd turned the warehouse into a heritage center, a museum to his own genius. It was mostly for show, for press tours. The servers there were inactive, relics. But they were still on the internal network, a forgotten back alley into the castle. The security there would be lighter, nostalgic, the perfect vulnerability. The night of the infiltration was humid, the Texas air thick enough to drink. Dressed in dark, nondescript clothes, Liam approached the old warehouse. It looked different now, landscaped and signposted, a monument to a lie. His heart was a drum against his ribs, but his mind was preternaturally calm. This was just another system test, a high-stakes debug. He avoided the main doors, heading instead for a loading dock around the back. He'd designed the security system for this building himself years ago. He knew its rhythm, its blind spots. There was a maintenance port for the HVAC system, one he'd used once to run a temporary cable. It was supposed to be welded shut after the renovation. He pried at the edges with a crowbar. With a groan of protesting metal, it gave way. He slipped inside, into the familiar, dusty darkness. The space had been cleaned up, but the skeleton was the same. His old workbench was there, under a spotlight, like a museum exhibit. The irony was so bitter he could taste it. In the center of the room, under a glass plaque that read "The Genesis Server," was their original prototype. It was powered down, a museum piece, but its network jack, he knew, was still live, a tribute to the past left connected to the present. Julian's sentimentality was his greatest weakness. Liam connected his laptop to the server. The screen glowed in the dark room. He bypassed the basic security with a few keystrokes. He was in. The familiar architecture of his own creation greeted him. He felt the pang of loss, so sharp it was physical. This was his life's work, and he was about to violate it to save it. He uploaded the Janus package, the progress bar filled with agonizing slowness. Every second felt like an hour. He expected alarms to blare, lights to flash. Upload complete. Janus deployed, awaiting activation command. He let out a shuddering breath. It was done. He erased his digital footprints, disconnected, and melted back into the night. The ghost was in the machine. Now he had to wait. and hope his creation was as loyal to him as he had once been to his friend. The waiting was the hardest part. He moved to a remote cabin in the hill country, rented under a fake name with the last of his money. He lived off the grid, his existence pared down to the essentials: his laptop, his satellite link, and his burning need for justice.
Weeks turned into a month. He watched from a distance as Julian's star rose ever higher. Nexus landed a massive Department of Defense contract. Julian was on the cover of Forbes, his smile brighter than ever. The headline read, "The visionary who builds the future alone." Liam's existence had shrunk to a tiny, angry point in the universe. He was a ghost, haunting the periphery of his own life. Then, one night, the signal came, a single encrypted ping on his satellite link. Janus was ready. It had completed its mission. It had found the proof. His hands trembled as he entered the decryption key. Data began to flood his screen. It was everything. It was a digital confession of biblical proportions. The source code forgeries, side-by-side comparisons showing his original code and the altered versions Julian's engineers had created to frame him. The metadata showed the creation dates of the forgeries were all after Liam's ousting. The financial trail, a complex web of transactions funneling millions from Nexus into shell corporations and then directly into Julian's private accounts. The same accounts had funded the payments to the forensic document expert who had forged Liam's signature on the loan documents for his house. The email chain was the most damning evidence of all. Messages between Julian and the head of security, Ben Carter, plotting Liam's removal. "We need to stage the espionage evidence before the board meeting on the 14th. The psychological assessment is drafted, just need a compliant psychiatrist to sign off. Make sure his wife is dealt with. She's a loose end." The recording. Janus had tapped into Julian's personal laptop microphone. There was an audio file. Liam, his heart in his throat, clicked play. Julian's voice, smooth and confident. "Once the restraining order is in place, he's finished. No one will believe a word he says. He's just the crazy, jealous co-founder who couldn't handle success." Another voice, nasal and anxious, the CFO. "And the wife? She's still a problem." Julian, laughing. "Ilara, she's not a problem. She's an asset. She believes every word I tell her. The poor thing is terrified of him. Once he's safely locked away in a facility somewhere, she'll be so grateful she'll do anything I say. She's already receptive." The casual cruelty in his voice was worse than any shouted insult. It was the sound of absolute, unassailable power, of a man who believed he had already won and was simply enjoying the spoils. Liam sat back, the weight of the evidence pressing down on him. He had it. The complete, undeniable truth. The cold, black star of his fury finally had a target. But he wouldn't just leak it to the press. That was too messy, too open to manipulation by Julian's PR machine. He needed a reveal so spectacular, so public, and so humiliating that there would be no coming back from it. He needed to hijack Julian's greatest moment and turn it into his own personal gallows. He saw that Julian was scheduled to give the keynote address at Tech Horizon, the industry's biggest conference, in 2 days. He would be unveiling Aura 2.0 to a global audience. It was the perfect stage. The day of the keynote, Liam was back in Austin. He wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, a ghost among the living. He sat in the very back row of the massive convention hall, watching the spectacle unfold. Julian took to the stage to a thunderous ovation. He looked like a king, dressed in a custom-tailored suit, radiating confidence. He spoke about the future, about innovation, about building a better world. The hypocrisy was so thick, Liam could almost smell it. "And now," he said, his voice echoing through the hall, "the moment you've all been waiting for, the next evolution of intelligent design. I am proud to present, for the first time anywhere, Aura 2.0. The screen behind him lit up. The Nexus logo spun gracefully. The audience leaned forward, phones held aloft to capture history. This was it. From his backpack, Liam pulled out his laptop and a secure wireless dongle. He took a deep breath. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about restoration, about speaking his name back into existence. He typed the command, "Janus, activate Phase 2. Execute broadcast protocol."
On stage, Julian was basking in the applause. The demo was about to begin. Suddenly, the sleek Aura 2.0 interface on the giant screen flickered and dissolved. A new window opened. It was a simple command prompt. Words began to type themselves out, letter by letter, in stark white text on a black background. A collective, confused murmur rippled through the audience. Julian frowned, glancing off stage at his text. The words kept coming. "Hello, Julian." The murmuring grew louder. Julian's smile was frozen, confused. "It's been a while. Let's talk about the future. Our future. First, let's show them what Aura 2.0 is really built on." The screen split. On one side, the current official source code. On the other, the original, unaltered code, with Liam's unique digital signature watermarked on every major module. Lines of Julian's forged code were highlighted, then graphically crossed out as the original code restored itself. It was a live, undeniable autopsy of the theft. Gasps filled the room. Cameras flashed wildly. Now, let's talk about finances. Bank statements, transaction records, maps of shell corporations, all damning evidence of embezzlement, flashed across the screen in a relentless, automated slideshow. Julian was frantically trying to get off the stage, but the microphone had cut out. Security was rushing towards him, but also towards the tech booth, unsure what was happening. And finally, let's hear it from the man himself. The audio recording from his laptop began to play. His own voice, clear as a bell, filled the silent, stunned auditorium. Once the restraining order is in place, he's finished. No one will believe a word he says. Ilara, she's not a problem. She's an asset. The screen went black. Then, a final message appeared large and centered. Aura was built by Liam Croft. The truth was hidden by Julian Vance. Justice was delivered by Janus. For a second, there was dead silence. Then the room erupted into chaos. Liam didn't stay to watch. He closed his laptop, stood up, and walked out of the convention center into the bright Texas sun. He didn't look back. He could hear the shouts, the confusion, the rising wave of scandal breaking behind him. He had taken back his name. He had spoken himself back into existence. The ghost had returned. The fallout was immediate and total. Julian Vance was arrested before he even left the building, charged with fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and a dozen other crimes. His empire collapsed in a single day. The board of Nexus Dynamics, scrambling to save whatever was left of the company, reached out to Liam with a desperate offer: full reinstatement, a majority stake, the title of CEO. He turned them down. He wanted nothing to do with the carcass of his old dream. The civil suits took longer. It took months to untangle the legal web Julian had woven. The house was returned to him. His bank accounts were restored. The restraining order was expunged, replaced by one against Julian. Alara came to see him. She showed up at the cabin one afternoon, her face etched with shame and regret. She told him everything. How Julian had preyed on her fears, showed her expertly forged documents, and isolated her. He'd promised to protect her from Liam's downward spiral. She had been a pawn, and she was heartbroken that she had ever doubted him. Liam listened. He saw the truth in her eyes. The manipulation had been expert, but the trust between them was a shattered vase. He could see all the pieces and how they used to fit together, but he knew it could never hold water again. The love had been a casualty of Julian's war. They parted ways, not with anger, but with a profound shared sadness. The one unalloyed joy was Kepler. The puppy was returned to him by animal control. Julian had dumped him at a shelter. The moment the dog saw him, he went into a frenzy of barking and tail wagging, covering his face in slavery kisses. In the dog's simple, unconditional love, he found a sliver of the peace he'd been fighting for.
He sold his stake in Nexus for a fortune. He didn't need it. He'd already started something new, a small nonprofit called the Janus Initiative, dedicated to helping victims of digital fraud and identity theft. He used his skills not to build empires, but to give people back their names. He bought a smaller, quieter house with a big yard for Kepler. He never went back to the corporate world. He spent his days working on projects he loved, and his evenings walking his dog under the wide Texas sky. One evening, about a year after the keynote, he was sitting on his porch watching Kepler chase fireflies. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Julian Vance had been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. There would be no early parole. The judge had cited the premeditated, pervasive, and psychologically cruel nature of his crimes. Liam read the headline, felt the expected surge of vindication, and then nothing. The cold, black star of his fury had finally burned out. It had served its purpose. It had kept him alive, given him focus, and delivered justice. But it was a terrible fuel, and he was glad to be rid of it. He looked out at the twilight. He was alone, but he was not lonely. He was at peace. The past was finally, truly, behind him. He had built a new life from the rubble of the old one. It was quieter, it was smaller, but it was undeniably, authentically his. What Julian did wasn't just about greed. It was about something far darker. The need to not just have everything, but to be everything. To erase the very person who helped you rise, because their existence is a constant reminder that you didn't do it alone. The most dangerous person isn't the one who hates you. It's the one who feels entitled to your life, your work, your love, and believes their genius lies not in creation, but in possession. And in the end, the most powerful revenge isn't destruction. It's rebuilding something true, something they can never touch, on the ashes of their lies. What's the most shocking betrayal you've ever witnessed? Was it from someone you thought was a friend, a partner, family? Share your stories in the comments below. Sometimes talking it out is the first step to taking your power back. If this story resonated with you, give it a like and subscribe for more tales of justice, revenge, and the twists of fate. Thanks for watching.